Hello class, and welcome back to Mr. Holland's biology class, and we are talking about the nutrient cycles. And we left off the carbon cycle, and now I'm on page 84 here, and I'm talking about the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen, and I'm just going to write N for that, meaning nitrogen, is needed to make amino acids which become proteins. And that's important for us because we like to eat proteins, and we are made of proteins. So that's one of the important things here on page 84 they start this section with. Nitrogen-containing substances such as ammonia, nitrate ions, and nitrite ions are found in soil, in the waste products produced by many organisms, and in dead and decaying organic matter. Ooh, dead and decaying. Dissolved nitrogen also exists in several forms in the ocean and other large water bodies. Figure 318 shows how different forms of nitrogen cycle through the biosphere. So take a look at that diagram and study it. Read some of these captions and propose some questions for me to ask, for you to ask me in class. So what I've typed here is nitrogen gas makes up 70% of our air. Also, we need bacteria to convert nitrogen gas into ammonia in a process called nitrogen fixation. That's one of your highlighted terms here that they're asking you about in the book. Additionally, soil bacteria convert that fixed nitrogen into nitrates and nitrites. Once these forms of nitrogen are available, primary producers can use them to make proteins and nucleic acid. And remember, primary producers are things like plants. Also, consumers eat the producers and reuse nitrogen to make their own nitrogen-containing compounds. Decomposers release nitrogen from waste and dead organisms as ammonia, nitrates, and nitrites that producers may take up again. So other soil bacteria obtain energy by converting nitrates into nitrogen gas, which is released into the atmosphere in a process called denitrification. I'm going to type that in here. Denitrification. Okay, and then tell yourself what that is. So these are just a few of my notes that I've taken from this paragraph on page 84. Also, the little titles underneath the diagram here, the nitrogen cycle. The atmosphere is the largest reservoir of nitrogen in the biosphere. Nitrogen also cycles through the soil and through the living tissues of living organisms. So take a look at the diagram and ask questions based on that. Next, we get to the phosphorus cycle. Now, the phosphorus cycle has an equally interesting diagram with a lot of arrows and a lot going on here, a lot of little captions. I know you may think it's confusing, but really the phosphorus cycle, phosphorus in the biosphere cycles among the land, ocean, sediments, and living organisms. Unlike other nutrients, phosphorus is not found in significant quantities in the atmosphere. But it says here that phosphorus is essential to living organisms because it forms part of vital molecules such as DNA and RNA. I thought that was important, so I put it in my notes. Unlike carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen, phosphorus does not enter the atmosphere in significant amounts. Instead, phosphorus in the form of inorganic phosphate remains mostly on land in the form of phosphate rock and soil minerals, and in the ocean as dissolved phosphate and phosphate sediments as seen in figure 319. So they're showing you that here, and some of these little diagram subtitles or these little captions will explain some of that. Rocks and sediments gradually wear down and phosphate is released. Some phosphate stays on land and cycles between organisms and soil. So what can we write for this? Let's write that phosphate is found mostly on land and not in the atmosphere. So after reading this section on the phosphorus cycle, I've summarized it with my notes here. And I'm going to take a look at the diagram, and we'll take a look at the color codes because we have orange arrows, green arrows, and we also have purple arrows, and those are indicators for specific pathways that phosphorus follows. The same with the other diagrams in the nutrient cycles, carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Then they talk about nutrient limitation. And what does that mean, nutrient limitation? Well, just what it says. If enough sunlight and water are available, the primary productivity of an ecosystem may be limited by the available nutrients. So you can have all of the right conditions except for the nutrients, and then you will have limits on plant growth and therefore consumer growth. And so it's a really important concept of nutrient limitation. So that's pretty straightforward. Nutrient limitation says, how does nutrient availability relate to the primary productivity in an ecosystem? It's like if you're making sandwiches. If you don't have enough bread, then that's going to be the limiting nutrient there. If you don't have enough onions, that's going to be the limiting nutrient. So either way, as soon as you run out of one thing that does not allow you to complete entire sandwiches, those are the limiting factors. And that's what we're talking about here. Now, nutrient limitation in soil. You see, farmers use fertilizer because they contain large amounts of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which help plants grow better in poor soil. And micronutrients such as calcium, magnesium, sulfur, iron, and manganese are necessary in relatively small amounts, and these elements are sometimes included in specialty fertilizers. Carbon is not included in chemical fertilizers because plants acquire carbon dioxide from the atmosphere during photosynthesis. So that's an easy one there. All nutrient cycles work together like gears in figure 320. Take a look at that, and they kind of show how they help each other. If any nutrient is in short supply, if any wheel sticks, the whole system slows down or stops altogether. So it's important to have the right balance of all of them together rather than just too much of one or just the absence of another. So there you have nutrient limitations in soil. Also, in streams, lakes, and freshwater places, phosphorus is the limiting nutrient. And too much of a nutrient can cause too much plant growth, and then that makes things out of balance, and some life forms they die. So remember, matter is recycled through ecosystems. No new matter is generated. Energy is continually input into ecosystems and moves through ecosystems in a one-way path. Also, how are evaporation and transpiration similar? And we want to suggest that water from the ocean evaporates into the atmosphere, and then it falls onto land as precipitation and then flows to the ocean as surface runoff. Also, organisms need nutrients to build tissues and carry out life functions. If vast amounts of forests are cleared and burned, levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide will likely increase. Also, most primary producers need sunlight, water, and nutrients to carry out photosynthesis. If water and sunlight are in ample supply, it's the amount of nutrients that limits the primary productivity. And finally, fertilizer runoff can supply a large amount of nitrogen and/or phosphorus to an aquatic ecosystem. The algae in the ecosystem may suddenly have a much larger supply of the limiting nutrient in the ecosystem, producing an algal bloom. And you'll learn more about that if you take environmental science. We study aquatic habitat, and so it's pretty important that you learn this now. Come to that class in a year or two, and we'll take you down and we'll show you some of this algal bloom, as it's pronounced. So that is 3.4, and this concludes Chapter 3 for biology. And prepare some questions, ask for explanations, and we'll do a virtual lab on ecosystems when you come into class next time. Well, we will have finished by the time you see this video. So signing off, this is Mr. Hollins. Take care.